So, like I said, we're back talking about the orcs. It's episode 12. We're in the third segment of the entire orc lore, right? So last time we were here, we were kind of talking about how the orcs kind of kept their distance, surrounding the whole Gorian city thing. We talked about who was Cho'Gall a little bit. We talked about Gul'dan a little bit and his whole folly. But then we come into a part of the timeline after the Second War where there's this rise of a horde, a new horde, right? But there's a particular orc that kind of, God, early Warcraft RTS, right? When we left off, we were talking about how the orcs were victorious over the Gorian Empire because they never retired, you know, they never kind of recovered from that entire war thing. They had Nelgrim and the other shaman kind of frightened by the elementals that we thought we had lost touch with. So there's a whole lot going on. But before going any farther in the entirety of the story of the orcs, you know, past them, you have to talk about, you know, before Burning Crusade, you have to talk about how Thrall came to rise. You have to talk about the founding of Orgrimmar, right? Our pivotal city. So let's get into that, right? Thrall, also, you know, his birth name in some places, you know, that as you learn later on, was Goel, right? He's the son of both Durotan and Draka. He is the former war chief in today's standards of this shamanistic horde, but he kind of found the nation of Durotar's itself in Kalimdor. Born in the beginning of the First War, he was kind of founded floating down a river, kind of like kind of in a Moses way, right? Draka sent him in the basket down the river, hoping he would find his way somewhere in the new world that they had just crossed, coming over to the Dark Portal. Baby Thrall was picked up by Aedelas Blackmore, who kind of gave Thrall his name. Thrall, for those of us who aren't familiar with the term, is both a slave and, because of his hulking size, a gladiator, right? Aedelas Blackmore was very harsh general in the Alliance army. So he later joined Orgrim Doomhammer in freeing the orcs, kind of imprisoned after the Second War. Being named war chief after Doomhammer's death, but only after leading the horde away from the Alliance, claimed, you know, the Eastern Kingdoms. He made allies with the Darkspear Trolls, the Bloodhoof, over in Mount Hyjal. Then he led these diplomatic efforts, kind of, you know, at peace with the Horde Alliance after the end of the Third War. After the fall of the Lich King and the increase in the elemental unrest, heralding towards the cataclysm, he stepped down later on. He stepped down as leader of the Frostwolves. And Draka, his mother, who she was a fierce orc herself. He was born in the year 1 of their home in the Altered Mountains. Soon after his birth, Draka and the child accompanied Durotan to the secret meeting with Orgrim Doomhammer over in Loch Modan. But while in Loch Modan, Durotan warned Orgrim about this treachery of that Gul'dan was doing with his Shadow Council, who kind of used the race as vessels, like for his. And on their way home, when in truth the guards were actually assassins, right? They thought they were going to see Orgrim, but they were never really. It was all ill intent. He had Durotan and Draka both brutally murdered. But Draka, while leaving, you know, the infant, she kind of let them die, you know, helplessly in the wilderness. He was found amongst these bloody bodies and parts by Aedelas, and he kind of gave him, you know, a place to sleep, if you will. So the remainder of his life, Thrall had not only to get away from the word Thrall, but he kind of embraced it and made it his own over time. So Blackmore returned to his fortress, right? He was over in Durnhold. With, you know, being raised in the world of humans, he kind of had like this savagery that comes with being an orc, right? This natural bloodlust, this natural honorable fight mentality, never to back down. But at the same time, he was kind of molded with these little strategic and intellectual thinking ways of a human. He was trained and taught by tons. He was wet nursed by a human woman, believe it or not, and kind of grew to befriend their daughter, Sharifa Foxton. Thrall provided, you know, improved to be this excellent student and a phenomenal fighter. Obviously, you can imagine he was going against an orc one-on-one in battles in the gladiator ring. It's almost, well, let's be honest, it's completely unfair. So he was this gladiator in Durnhold's arena, and Aedelus's major source of money. During one encounter in the arena, Arthas, Prince, Lich King, Prince Arthas Menethil, back when he was still a prince, he visited Durnhold in order to watch Thrall in a fight. He never even realized the two paths that they would soon have crossed, Thrall's first encounter with other orcs was while he was training with Sergeant and several trainees at Durnhold. There was a cart of captured orcs. They were moving through Durnhold at the time, just to be kept within the camps, and then one who saw Thrall believed, rather than it being a training exercise, that he was ganged up on by the humans. The orc broke free of his chains and moved to save Thrall, yelling at him in the orcish thrown away, but at the time, Thrall didn't understand the language except for human. So he had no idea what the would-be savior orc was shouting at him. He had no clue. The orc was then beaten and killed right in front of him. Thrall was still young, so he realized that if you break away, it's death. It's just that simple. Even though he was clever, quicker, and he's even large by orc standards. So Blackmore's abusive beatings both in and out of the ring began to take its toll. Now Taretha Foxton, she began to write him letters and secretly deliver them to him in his cage in books, and then he wrote back to her. Eventually he wrote to Taretha that he wished to escape. Following this series, Taretha created a diversion inside of Durnhold Keep, which kind of allowed Thrall to escape from his cell unnoticed. Then they met up outside the fortress by the cave, and Taretha gave him enough provisions and enough supplies for him to leave Durnhold, hopefully never coming back. He was captured and taken to an internment camp, not too far away, run by Lauren Remke. And that's where he met an older orc with these glowing red eyes that we call Kelgar, who told him of the corruption that Gul'dan had done, and how the old ways had been so much easier for them. He told him that only with one still thinking of embracing was that if someone that was the undefeated Grom Hellscream, chieftain of the Warsong clan. When another orc told Thrall that Blackmore had arrived at the camp, looking for him, Thrall escaped again to go find Grom Hellscream, teaching him his native language, for first off, and then telling him that based on the tattered swaddling cloth Thrall showed him. So after spending a little bit of time with Hellstream, Thrall decided to take a leave, to take his leave from Warsong in order to search out his roots out in Alterac Mountains. After, going through this huge journey, Thrall was actually collapsing in exhaustion when he was rescued by the Frostwolves, and then they took him to their camp, where he met Drekthar, the old shaman. Drekthar was the one that told Thrall that he was he was the son of a chieftain of the Frostwolves at one time, and once Thrall had found his place among the Frostwolves, Drekthar taught him the old ways of the Horde. And this is not now's time, this is like before Gul'dan's time. So pretty soon thereafter, Thrall was kind of accepted, right? He was a member of the clan. A Frostwolf named Snowsong eventually chose Thrall to be her companion. So he had his mount, right? Snowsong was his. A little bit of time after choosing that he was called away by Drekthar, there was this little quiet place he had never seen before. It was where he had been initiated. It was kind of a spiritual experience, right? When the Frostwolves make you part of the clan, it's almost like a bit as far as presence, as far as like a rite of passage, if you will. befriended the spirits of earth, air, and fire, water, and the wilds. So he became the first new shaman since Gul'dan's vile corruption swept across the entirety of the orc race. He returned to a camp, a completely new orc, became fully immersed in the old ways, all the ancient rites of a shaman and his clan. Learned how to wield the fury of the storms and earth, and embracing his role as the son of a chieftain. There was a significant and symbolic event, since Thrall was the first shaman to be accepted by the spirits since Drek'Thar's time. Been a long time since elements had abandoned the orcs. So not only did this mean that Thrall would have been destined to be one of the greatest shamans in Orcish history, but it also meant that the spirits finally forgave the Orcish race for consorting with demonic powers, and they deemed Thrall as the first brand new generation shaman because they knew him to be completely pure of the demonic forces that had been brainwashed across generations of orcs before him. They knew he was in darkness. They knew if they needed a chance, this is the guy. The camp was soon visited by this wandering stranger, right where Thrall was with Drek'Thar. And at first, Thrall spoke kind of pleasantly with him, but began to grow angry when the stranger accused the Frostwolves of hiding away in their mountains. His fury, his orcish pride, his newfound orcish pride, was kind of growing within him and threatened to dream it. So that the humans were not worth fighting. So enraged, Thrall challenged the stranger to single combat, and the stranger threw aside his cloak to reveal a worn black plate of this massive warhammer. And after this short but brutal contest, Thrall managed to disarm him, but was prevented from throttling the stranger by some of his clan. It was then that the stranger kind of revealed himself as Orgrim Doomhammer, right? The war chief of the Horde, the war chief himself. Doomhammer had been contacted by Drek'Thar into a fight to see if Drek'Thar's praises were deserved, and it was. Because not only was Thrall able to challenge Doomhammer's strength, but he was able to best him. It's a feat that only happened one other time, and that was by Durotan. It was Thrall's father himself that was able to do so. So after this was happening, Doomhammer kind of named Thrall his second in command and explained the strategy for prisoners, then riled up the orcs with shows of his shamanistic powers. So that it was kind of just bringing this rallying cry for them to make one last stand and break free from the chains and just the overall depression they've been in. So with the downtrodden, once the first three encampments, this proved to be an effective tactic, and on the fourth one, Thrall was too easily recognized, and thus they had to resort to the numbers of the new horde. The shamanistic powers wielded by Thrall to liberate the encampment. At the fifth, they were even better prepared. Knights from Durnhold Keep had been stationed from the remaining encampments, so that whichever camp they attacked, there would be this greater resistance. So during the liberation of this encampment, now for the Horde outpost at Hammerfall, out in Arathia, laying there in his dying breath, he gave Thrall his big black plate armor and his warhammer, and named him War Chief. In his last moments. Which is that's the moment. That's when it all began. He made sure to restore but not replace the backplate period. Thrall's first action as war chief was to attack Durnhold in an effort to dismantle the entire internment camp system. He secretly met with Taretha, who was Foxton from his slavery days in the old time of Durnhold. He was asking her to leave with her and her family, but she refused, hoping that would never come to battle and fearful of the consequences if Blackmore noticed her missing. Blackmore had taken her as his mistress at that time and arranged that she had never been happy with. When Thrall was at Durnhold with the horde at his back, he confronted, of course, the drunken Blackmore and asked for a peaceful parley in order to prevent useless bloodshed. Blackmore, of course, went through the plethora of emotions, and from amusement at the Thrall's rise of power, anger at what the war chief was demanding, and grief at how Thrall had supposedly betrayed him. This is what he would do with his traitors. To the sight of Taretha's decapitated bloody head. Now imagine that was Thrall's really only childhood friend. She taught him how to read, she taught him how to write. She was a pivotal part in his existence from a young age, because when he knew nothing else. She was the closest thing that he really had as family. So of course, naturally, in rage and grief, he starts screaming. The elements themselves are kind of echoing his fury, and he gave the command to attack. And then during the siege, Thrall cornered Blackmore in his hidden tunnel and tossed the sword into the treacherous man's feet. Blackmore kind of sobered enough to hold his own against the war chief, but he was holding back to allow Blackmore to, give him a fighting chance. But when he tried to explain, he asked for Thrall, really to aid him, to help subjugate the Alliance. The war chief's rage at Taretha's fate kind of broke all barriers and struck him with a mortal blow. And as he later died, the master Durnhold expressed pride in what Thrall had become. It's kind of what Blackmore had made him, so, or that's what he thought in his dying breath, which is kind of funny when you think about it. That just goes to show the ego the guy had. Though he died at his hand, he thought because it was his gladiator training and years of fighting that made Thrall who he is, not realizing that the entirety of what he had gone through, be accepted as an orc and be taught the ways of the Horde, and all of those things. So Thrall emerged, kind of shaken from the whole battle, and then he came out of the castle to realize, take the superiors, to free the remaining orcs, and to see land for their use. If the Alliance would let them be, they would not be trouble, and be willing to engage in cooperation and trade. But if the Alliance chose to fight them, they would have made an enemy to the likes of which they've never even seen. So when he left Durnhold after allowing the sergeant and the surviving humans to walk away unharmed, he had Tari's necklace delivered to her parents. And when they were gone, he called upon the spirit of Earth to destroy the keep before leading his people to freedom. So Durnhold keep was in ruin, which is why we still see it in ruin now. He later composed a song of the hero to commemorate Taretha's sacrifice, right? Which probably sounds a little something like,
I call to you, great spirits. Grant the Horde your blessing, for on this day our cause is righteous and just.
Something like that. At some point during the liberation from the orcs in the camps, Thrall learned about the orc named Eitric. I never got that right. Thrall's orcs followed the two and found them where Eitric reminded Thrall of Durotan, and he was allowed to join the new Horde and the human. Tyrion was astonished by Thrall, who allowed him to leave because he had saved Eitric's life. So Thrall and Grom, after all this was treasonous and all the orcs were freed and this and that, Thrall and Hellscream spent a lot of time gathering, and then they kind of dispersed forces of the Horde. But it was sometime later when Thrall was, with a smaller force up in the Arathi Islands, that he received a strange dream. Saw a ton of armies clashing, fire rain from the sky, and a voice warning him of things to come. When he woke up, he realized that it was no dream. It was kind of a mysterious prophecy. But the prophet kind of enigmatically told him that sail west of Kalimdor, and there they'd find their destiny. So Thrall obeyed his prophet. He started gathering the Horde. They prepared to make their way across this great sea. The clans began, kind of assembling, and they constructed the base for the Horde to have a place to stay. Grom turned out and was captured by the humans. The Thrall quickly stepped in to save him. Hellscream then got the idea to steal the human ships so they could leave the human lands forever. When the Horde assembled, they stole the ships and left across the Great Stream, kind of go across to the Forgotten Lands of Kalimdor. Because they don't really know what was on the other continent. But halfway along their journey, the ships were beset by this fierce storm near the middle that we know as the Maelstrom. And they were kind of night and day on the island. So fearing for the Horde and the Darkspear Troll's safety, Thrall and his warriors assaulted the human base. They said that let's take it over. During his day, he reactivated the Fountain of Health and discovered that the Isle had these active volcanoes. But then many Murlocs attacked the Horde, the humans, the Darkspear Trolls, as Murlocs do. They don't really care. If you're going to oppose them, you're going to die. So while the Orcish and human forces were occupied with one another, the Piscine monsters sought out the sacrifices for the rituals. Which is kind of funny if you think about it. Thrall was then imprisoned within the Murloc's fiery dungeon. He learned from a troll headhunter, with whom he shared a cell, the Murlocs planned to sacrifice them both to a sea witch. Fortunately, though the Murlocs were strangely advanced, but they were kind of unaware of Thrall's shamanistic abilities. The war chief was able to escape and free his warriors. One grunt reported that Sen'jin was not in the cells, but he was taken as the first sacrifice. So Thrall raced to the altar and was forced to watch in horror as the Murloc sorcerer killed Sen'jin. Thrall and his warriors were able to kill the Murloc. All the guardians maintained the magic barrier and prevented the escape of the Murloc sorcerer. But it was too late for the troll leader, unfortunately. The dying Sen'jin, he revealed the vision to Thrall, right? He saw that Thrall would lead the Darkspear's tribes to greatness. So Thrall then offered the remaining trolls a place in the Horde for the kindness that they had shown the Orcs. Now we know why that Thrall, solely and purely, was the reason the trolls had become into the new Horde. So when Thrall came out of the cave and was confronted by the Sea Witch, she threatened vengeance for the destruction of her altar and her worshippers. So she placed a curse upon the war chief and said that all of his forces would be swallowed by the sea upon returning to his base camp. Thrall discovered his ships, damaged by the storm, were not even ready to sail. And also one the island dormant volcano erupted, and the island had begun to sink. Meanwhile, the Sea Witch herself launched her Murloc forces against the Horde, thirsty for vengeance, necessarily. But aided by the trolls, the Horde was able to hold off the attackers, long enough to repair their ships, and managed to escape before the isle sunk. The Sea Witch then told Thrall that a dark tide, sound familiar, would swallow them all, and there'd be nowhere to hide. The Sea Witch's curse may have come true, depending on how close her island was to Kalimdor, because Thrall's forces, they were shipwrecked. And it can be assumed that other clans, such as Hellstreams, were not amongst those caught by the storm and driven to the island. Once the ships had been kind of scattered, and many of those had been put on board, barely made it to the shores of Kalimdor alive. Those were scattered, and Thrall slowly roamed the coast, collecting orcs and trolls as he came across the dead, but Grom couldn't be found. This new land held many strange new creatures, but the most brutal were the centaurs, particularly in their treatment of the Tauren. When Thrall battled a group of centaurs, the army had been seen advancing into the north. Then they quickly departed, as Cairn realized that this village was in danger. So Thrall's forces followed Cairn back to the village, where they defended it from the centaurs. Since the centaurs had driven off all the game in the region, the Bloodhoof tribe needed to abandon their home and travel to Malgor, but they had hoped of actual survival without starvation. So Cairn came to tell the location of the Oracle, who would help the Orcs in their quest for this destiny, if they would help protect Cairn's caravan to Malgor. So Thrall agreed to the terms, because why not? If it's gonna benefit both of you, might as well. He helped the Tauren with their lengthy journey, protecting them and their lumbering Kodo beasts from these marauding centaurs. Cairn told Thrall this mythical oracle in Stone Talon Peak would help them find their destiny in the strange lands. So glad of having made a new friend in a foreign land, he gratefully thanked Cairn, and they parted as allies. When Thrall kind of, arrives at the base of Stone Talon Peak, he was shocked and found out that Grom Hellstream and the Warsong clan, battling the humans under the command of Jade, the Mountain and Zeppelins, would allow them to bypass any of the defenses. So as Thrall trying to make his way stealthily up, the goblins, the impatient Hellstream, unexpectedly attacked the humans. They retaliated by attacking him and to Thrall's forces. So Thrall was forced to stay and attack their bases. He managed to acquire some Zeppelins. Thrall confronted Grom, but Hellstream argued that a true warrior would have fought the humans without question instead of trying to sneak past them to avoid a battle. But that's where the strategy that Blackmore taught him. He wasn't thinking like a conventional orc, which is half the reason he was as successful as he was. He had the edge. He had the strategy. He had the organization behind it. Kind of curated over many years of how to be precise and yet tactical and everything else. So as Thrall made his way up the mountain, he was surprised to find his path crossing with Cairn once again, wyverns in the Stone Talon Mountains. And the wyverns were imprisoned by wild harpies. God, I hate harpies. So after a short battle, they were defeated, and the wyverns, which were super grateful and, companion little beasts, lent their services to Thrall and the Horde. And with their help, Thrall was able to destroy the human encampment and entered the caverns. Thrall and Cairn kind of separated, right? And searched the caverns themselves. After a little bit of time went by, they found an Oracle Chain. They also found that Jane and Proudmoore were about to battle when the Oracle appeared. Revealing himself to the Prophet, to be Prophet, that Thrall and Jada had met in order. He told Thrall of Drom's corruption, that the Orcs and humans must join forces or be destroyed. So reluctantly, Thrall kind of agreed, just desperate enough to save Grom Hellstream. Which is kind of a big deal, because Thrall knew humans. He knew the ones that were, specifically rotten, weren't to be trusted. He did it anyway to save the life of a fellow orc. Let's just let all that sink in, right? Because I'm gonna fill this up. We're gonna keep going. We've only got a little bit in. Man, is it just getting good. So happy. Be right back. curse, right? They had to return to the Barrens to find Grom. And he was kind of in command of this corrupted last wing of the Warsong clan. He moved against them, and this demonic invasion of Escalandor began. And this epic battle took place, right, between the War Chief and Hellscream's forces. And the forces of fire and falling infernals lit up the night sky. Thrall, with the help of Karen and Jaina, believe it or not. Jaina at one time was friendly. They fought their way through the ranks of these blood-mad chaos orcs, determined to reach Hellscream at all costs. So finally, after defeating the Hellscream's army of orcs, Doomguards, Fellhounds, Warlocks, Thrall faced his old friend. Hellscream kind of taunted the War Chief, revealing to him that the demons didn't forcefully corrupt the orcs, but that the orc chieftains themselves willingly chose to drink the demon blood. So in full knowledge that it would forever enslave them to Legion's dark rule. Enraged at this revelation and betrayal, Thrall charged his old friend with the armies of Thrall and Grom along with the swarm of the Doomguards in battle. And after this long, desperate struggle, Thrall regained control of himself and managed to kind of capture Grom's essence in a soul gem and returned it to a ritual circle, where with the combination of Orcish shaman and elven magic, the demonic energy was purged from Grom's system. Grom, realizing what he had done, was instantly apologetic, as you can imagine. And then he and Thrall immediately set out to face Manaroth in a canyon carved by these fallen infernals. Thrall put an initial assault against Manaroth, but was subdued quickly. It would have been killed, but Grom not gathered his strength and made a devastating blow against the back of Manaroth, shattering, jumping around, shattering his plate, and driving his axe deep into his gut. It was enough to kill the Pit Lord, but as Manaroth died, these explosive energies burst out straight forward from his body and hit Grom at point-blank range. Chieftain of the Warsong clan was mortally wounded. So as the demonic red haze lifted from the eyes of Grom, Hellscream, and his clanmates, Grom was told that he had freed himself. Thrall approached Grom, telling him that he had freed not just him, but all of the orcs from corruption. So Grom had this heroic blow and this heroic feat amidst being tainted. He kind of just, Grom took it all, man. Then going forward, we have the Battle of Mount Hyjal, where Thrall and Jaina went into Ashenvale, but they found this new threat behind them as well in the front. The Night Elves, cursing them for killing of Cenarius, didn't know any better, attacked them as they attempted to make a new settlement. The demons and the undead, orcs and humans, the Night Elves were all battling for one another for survival. Until finally, Thrall received a vision to bring to Jaina to a grove at the base of Mount Hyjal. There he met the leaders of the Night Elves, which at the time was Tyrande Whisper, and Malfurion Stormrage. They were surprised finding each other there, until the prophet appeared once more and revealed himself to be, lo and behold, Medivh. Oh yeah, the last guardian of Tirisfal. He convinced them that they must all ally against the Burning Legion, or they would surely and quickly be defeated. Though uneasy, Tyrande and Malfurion agreed they all allied against Arkham and his plethora of demons, demonic and undead foes. As the allied races collectively defended Nordrison and Mount Hyjal, there was these 3 fortified settlements going up the mountain. Thrall's base having orcs, jungle trolls, Tauren, goblins, everyone kind of doing their best to slow Archimonde's ascension until the Night Elves, right? Their trap was almost prepared. As Archimonde made his way up to the mountain towards Thrall's base, he taunted Thrall by saying that his race wasn't even worth bothering with, and the orcs were weak. Thrall replied that their spirits are strong, and if they have to be defeated, at least they will be free. Struck out, attacking Archimonde and, hurting him a little bit with chain lightning. Then Jaina teleported him away. After the great battle, Archimonde was fully imagined that after the great blow, Thrall had to end their battle with something like this.
For Doomhammer!
Because why not? To find, they still hadn't had a capital city. The Horde hadn't. They've been kind of nomadic, getting all these things set up, encountering these new races and these new friendships, these new allies. So following their victory at Mount Hydro and a defeat of the Burning Legion, Thrall gathered his people and resolved about it in a later episode. But the Quillbore kind of claimed much of the land. So after this huge war kind of sectioned it out, on the upper east side of the Barrens, we carved out Durotar, naming it after his father. Together, fleshing out Durotar. The Tauren had gone in the Mulgore, and the trolls had settled down on the Echo Isles off the coast. Thrall was soon to be met by Rexxar, right? A whole new dude, a son of the Mok'Nathal. As you guys remember, hopefully, Morgan, which were Quillbores. And then they delivered a message. Thrall read it carefully, saddened by Morgan's death, but welcomed Rexxar to this newly crowned land. Rexxar considered staying, but then said he would need to earn his keep. Thrall agreed, so he sent Rexxar to speak to the various citizens of Pandora Brewmaster, named, you guessed it, Chen Stormstout, who had been searching the area for ingredients to use his new concoction, because that's what pandas do, man. If they don't eat and fight and sleep and drink, they cook. After Rexxar helped him find the ingredients, Chen tagged along with the troll and the Mok'Nathal, eager for adventure. Thrall, kind of waited in Orgrimmar, helping build the city. So Thrall was a little bit troubled by that. The treaty he had made with Jaina and hoped to keep such incursions from happening. After several more encounters with human, hostiles, there was a summit arranged between Thrall and Jaina. Rexxar encouraged Thrall to send them in his place, sensing that there was a trap. But Thrall kind of reluctantly denied it. And he kind of said, just let me do it. Sure enough, the emissaries, were uninterested in talk and unsuccessfully, of course, tried to kill Rexxar and his friends. After expressing disappointment that Thrall himself had not come to be slaughtered. Now, let's be honest, if you're not going to kill Rexxar and his two friends, what the hell makes you think you're going to be able to kill Thrall? But the dude's got the elements at his back. He's kind of intangible at the moment. So when Rexxar came back and told Thrall that there had been a deception, unable to believe that Jaina would do such a thing, Thrall prepared a note for Rexxar in secret. Then he wanted to bring it to Theramore and arrange a parley with Jaina herself. Only by meeting face to face could they ensure any sort of peace between the two races. So after hearing Rexxar's report of Admiral Proudmoore's arrival and the intent against the Orcs, Thrall realized that the only way to prevent yet another war was to assault Admiral Proudmoore's base and kill him. Rexxar's help, Thrall enlisted the aid of his old friend Cairn and the Tauren, as well as the Stonemaul Ogres. So while preparations were being made to storm Theramore, Thrall was informed that the island was surrounded by a blockade. The blockade was of ships that he assembled and force had no way of breaching. So being as frustrated by the news as he was, Jaina teleported into the scene. She assured everybody that she came in peace. She had known nothing of her father's plans, didn't know what to do. So the whole thing that Proudmoore had done had been behind Jaina's back. She had no idea of him planning to break the peace deal. Thrall was kind of sympathetic, but told her that, her father's actions could destroy Durotar. And the only way to ensure the security for a new nation with his people was to kill Dalen. Dalen is Jaina's father, Proudmoore, called here the big dude that we see in Battle for Azeroth. Jaina understood, and she was even willing to help, even if it meant the death of her father. She told Thrall that the location of a nearby goblin shipyard that could supply him with ships to break through the Admiral's blockade. She begged Thrall to spare as many of her men as possible in coming battle. Even though most of them were following her father, they were only family that she had left after the fall of Lordaeron. Thrall gave his word that he would try to keep bloodshed to the human side of a minimum and advised Jaina to get to safety since the battle was about to start. Using the ship's kind of, aspire from the goblins, Thrall's forces were able to fight their way into the Isle. They proceeded to engage Dalen Proudmoore's troops. So you had Rexxar, Rokan, Chen, Cairn. They kind of fought their way directly to Admiral Proudmoore himself and engaged him in combat. Before the battle was over, Thrall tried to tell the Admiral that the Horde was different from the one he had faced years ago. They had no interest in conquest or murder. Proudmoore was pissed, of course, and kind of raised the fact that Thrall's race was guilty of genocide. They would never be able to atone for the rampage through Stormwind and Lordaeron, that they had left these countless innocent people dead. He grimly vowed that he would never stop fighting the Orcs, and thus fought to his death. Thrall had predicted he would. As soon as Jaina fell to her knees near her father's body, asking him why he couldn't have listened. Rexxar tried to ease the sorceress' pain by telling her that her father was a proud warrior above all else and that she should be remembering him as such. Thrall proclaimed that the Horde had no quarrel with the surviving human. They would be leaving Theramore in peace. He took his forces back to Durotar and left Jaina to mourn. They did what they needed to do. They came there to ensure that he was a wanderer and his place was in the wilds. But he promised Thrall that if he was part of the Horde, and then it was his idea that it would help whenever he needed to be done so again. So Thrall said goodbye to Rexxar and resumed building Durotar. At the moment, all was well. It kind of brings us up to the lordship of Thrall. But I've kept you guys going for the last almost hour. We still got a lot to talk about, man. Kind of excited. There's not many things as, as important as there is with Thrall himself, right? He was a big deal. And as you can see and as you can hear these tales, you know why. But next week, I hope to tell more of you guys. I hope everyone's having a great weekend. So far, a good new year. I just hope it's better than the last one, man. But so far it is. But hang tight. We're going to go see Jewel Sound. I think she's playing some Valorant. Most likely. I appreciate everyone for stopping by. And just remember, before we go,
for the Horde.